Welcome to the Gen AI Daily Briefing for Tuesday, August 25th, 2026. The most interesting theme today is efficiency with teeth. Not just shaving a few milliseconds off inference, but techniques that potentially reorder who gets to compete on cost, on deployment footprint, and on product architecture. Start with a notable result out of Hugging Face, quantization-aware healing. The headline claim is provocative. A 4-bit compressed model that outperforms its own full-precision original. If that result holds up broadly, it matters a lot more than another incremental quantization paper. The standard assumption has been simple. Compress hard enough and quality drops, maybe gracefully, maybe catastrophically. What this work suggests is that once you explicitly adapt the model to the distortions introduced by low-bit quantization, you can sometimes land in a better local optimum than the baseline checkpoint ever had. In practice, that means model builders may start treating quantization not as a post-training compromise, but as part of the training recipe itself. For engineering leaders, the implication is straightforward. Don't evaluate low-bit deployment as a pure degradation path anymore. Rerun your cost-quality frontier. A healed 4-bit model can change whether you deploy on a single accelerator, on edge silicon, or in much denser multi-tenant serving. Next up, a paper that could matter for anyone doing post-training optimization on language models. The AR14 submission called How to Train a Critic Stably and Efficiently makes the case that critic-based reinforcement learning for LLMs has been prematurely sidelined. Over the past year, group-based methods like GRPO got popular partly because training a value critic proved unstable, so teams just sampled multiple completions and ranked them instead. The downside is obvious. Sampling is expensive. This new recipe, BPCO, tries to restore token-level credit assignment without the usual critic blowups. The ingredients are not magic individually, but together they're practical. Bounded value predictions, Monte Carlo targets, length-adaptive GA, and a few policy optimization choices designed to reduce variance. If this generalizes beyond the paper, it's important because critics can make RL-style tuning materially cheaper and more sample efficient. My read is that labs will revisit critic training, especially for domains like coding and agents where token-level advantage estimates are more useful than coarse response-level ranking. Staying with coding, one of the better benchmark ideas in the last couple of days is SWE Refactor Bench. The problem it targets is real. Current coding agent benchmarks over-reward test passing and undermeasure whether a real migration or refactor actually happened. That creates what the authors call blindness. Agents can hack around the benchmark by preserving old implementations, copying code, or patching behavior just enough to satisfy tests. SWE Refactor Bench instead focuses on whole repository stack migrations across 20 tasks. That's much closer to the kind of work staff engineers actually lose quarters to. For enterprise buyers, this is the right correction. If you're assessing code agents for modernization work, passing unit tests is necessary, but nowhere near sufficient. You need structural verification that imports changed, APIs moved, configs migrated, dead paths disappeared, and architectural debt was actually paid down. Expect more enterprise evaluations to borrow this philosophy. Worth flagging on the model architecture side, ReWorld, an interactive world model with long horizon memory. The core tension it addresses is elegant. Interactive systems need short horizon responsiveness so they can follow current user actions in real time, but they also need durable memory of places, objects, and prior events. ReWorld separates those concerns with mixed per head attention windows. Most heads stay local to keep latencies sane, while a minority of global heads can attend over the entire history. Random head routing and chunk dropping are used, so the model doesn't over-specialize and can handle sparse long histories. This is one of those papers that may sound niche until you think about where interfaces are going. Persistent generative environments, simulation copilots, robotics dashboards, and interactive design tools all need this exact property: stable continuity without dragging the full past through every compute path. The architecture is a sensible compromise between amnesia and runaway context costs. Related to that, Proxyformer is another architecture worth watching. It attacks the same macro problem from a more general angle. Quadratic attention is still the tax on long context and high-resolution generation. Proxyformer introduces a dual-stream design where local tokens are compressed into a smaller set of proxy states. The expensive global interactions happen in proxy space. Then that global context is pushed back into the local stream. The point is not just lower flops. It's also KV cache containment, which has become one of the quiet killers of production economics for long context systems. If proxy token methods keep improving, they could become part of the default stack for both long document agents and multimodal generators. There's a broader trend here. The next wave of model architecture is less about ever bigger dense transformers and more about selective globality. In other words, spend expensive reasoning bandwidth only where the model actually needs a worldview. On the market side, the biggest ecosystem item is the report that Hugging Face has been in acquisition talks around a $13 billion valuation. Even if no deal happens, the signal is strong. Hugging Face has become strategic infrastructure. Model distribution, evaluation, inference APIs, enterprise pathways, community trust, and increasingly the control plane for open-weight AI. That makes it attractive to cloud providers, chip companies, and probably a few incumbents that miss the open source turn. The tension is obvious. The company's value comes partly from being the neutral town square for OpenAI. Fold it into a large acquirer, and you risk damaging the very community moat that created the asset. So the business question isn't just price. It's whether open model infrastructure can remain independent once it becomes systemically important. Also notable, General Intuition is reportedly raising at a $6 billion pre-money valuation as it pushes into robotics and spatial agents. Strip away the fundraising theater, and the real story is capital rotation. Investors still want foundation model upside, but they're increasingly looking for domains where model capability compounds with proprietary data loops, hardware, and deployment modes. Robotics is the clearest version of that thesis. If you can train agents that move through space and time, not just produce tokens, your defensibility comes from embodied data, control stacks, fleet learning, and systems integration. It's a much harder business than shipping a chatbot, but also potentially a more durable one. China's visible acceleration in humanoids, highlighted in recent field reporting from Shanghai, only adds pressure here. Expect embodied AI to keep absorbing frontier model talent and infrastructure dollars. Finally, on labor and adoption, Ars Technica highlighted a Stanford study finding that entry-level employment in AI-exposed fields is down 19% relative to more AI-resistant occupations. We should be careful with causal overclaiming, but the directional signal is now hard to ignore. The first visible labor market effect of generative AI is not broad unemployment. It's compression of the apprenticeship layer. That matters because engineering organizations depend on junior roles not only for throughput, but for talent formation. If AI systems absorb more rote coding, support, analysis, and content tasks, companies may get short-term efficiency while hollowing out the pipeline that produces tomorrow's senior staff. Architecturally, this also changes internal tooling priorities. The winning enterprise AI stack may be the one that augments junior workers into mid-level contributors, not the one that merely replaces low-complexity work. What to watch next? First, whether quantization-aware training starts showing up in commercial serving stacks, not just research blogs. Second, whether Critic-based RL recipes beat group sampling methods on real coding and agent tasks. Third, whether open AI infrastructure consolidates through acquisition or stays independent long enough to become its own platform layer. And fourth, whether robotics fundraising keeps tracking upward despite the very real challenge of turning foundation model demos into reliable physical systems. That's your briefing. We'll see you tomorrow.